Okay, so part one, like I said, is about worship, and it's based on our reading, which was Matthew chapter 2, verses 1 to 12. So, today's reading was about a group of people who maybe would have been considered not to be in with the in crowd. They possibly were not seen as God's people. We're remembering the wise men who visited Jesus. At that time, the Israelites were the in crowd, God's chosen people, and so it would have probably been assumed that the Messiah was going to come for them, maybe them alone. They would be the in crowd, and everyone else would be the out. However, these foreign people made massive efforts to seek the Messiah. They would have had to travel hundreds of miles, and they wouldn't have had a plane or a train to go on. They maybe would have gone on camels or by foot. There were astrologers who studied the patterns of the stars and had seen a star in the sky that they knew meant someone special had been born. The chief priests and the teachers, important teachers at the time, all knew from the prophecies that the Messiah was going to be born in Bethlehem, but noticed that they didn't make that journey themselves. Maybe they didn't feel they needed to make that effort. Maybe they thought, we're God's chosen ones after all. Perhaps we don't need to make that effort. Perhaps they were too comfortable following their rules and laws which entitled them to be in God's family. The wise men, however, went to great lengths travelling to probably an unknown place or unfamiliar place to them. Now, as I've thought and read some commentaries about these wise men over the last few days, the theme that stood out for me was their worship. To make the journey, they really had to have faith in what they believed in, that what they had seen. Through their study and insights, they believed an important birth had taken place, and they acted on it. They acted on their faith. I'm sure they had other things to do, advising kings and things like that, but they allowed their busy lives to be put on hold to go and worship. When they arrived, Matthew writes, they were overjoyed. The star stopped. They knew they'd arrived, and standing outside what I'd imagine was a bit of a shack compared to what they were used to, or certainly not somewhere where they'd expect a king to be, they weren't disappointed at all. They wasted no time commenting on or complaining about the state of the place, or complaining that there wasn't many people there. They were just overjoyed to be there. They hadn't seen any more proof at that point, but they were already filled with joy. They arrived with confident expectation. They had come to worship, and they had brought some amazing worship, as we'll see. Next, they went to actually see Jesus. They saw the child with his mother. They didn't just sing a quick song and say amen and then disappear. They didn't think they weren't good enough, and they didn't politely leave to try not to disturb the family. They went to the house to see for themselves, to draw near to him. And when they saw Jesus, Matthew says, they bowed down and worshipped him. An act of humility. 3 wise men used to being around royalty and important people, humbling themselves to a child. This makes me think they are showing they know who he is, knowing they aren't worthy, but being grateful. The other thing to notice is that they came prepared. They brought gifts, and they gave their gifts to Jesus. I don't know if they knew the significance of the gifts they gave or not, but they opened their treasures and they presented them to Jesus. My final observation of the wise men's worship was that they listened. They didn't go back and tell Herod where he was, as they'd been asked to do. They didn't conform. They followed God's call, not the world's. Through Jesus, these people from a foreign land were able to worship and draw near to God. So what of our worship? I've done a bit of a wise men checklist for us. What effort do we put into our worship? Do we allow our lives to be disruptive and put on hold to spend time with God and follow him at any cost? Number 2, when we meet with God, either collectively like today or individually at home, do we look forward to our time with expectation of joy, not complaining or looking for faults or problems or seeing it as a chore, but focusing on the joy of being with the Father? Number 3, do we actively seek Jesus and expect to meet with him? When we sing, pray or meditate, do we do it with confidence, expecting to meet with God? Or does shame, unworthiness or the busyness of our lives get in the way? Number 4, do we show humility? Are we thankful for our relationship with God? Number 5, do we come prepared? And are we prepared to give our gifts to God, like the wise men did? They gave gold, incense and myrrh. But what are our gifts? What are our treasures? Maybe money, time, our skills, our likes. How do we offer these to God? Do we offer them all to God, or do we keep some back for ourselves? And number 6, do we make time to listen to God? Listen to God's instruction on our lives, following him, not the world. I know I'm guilty of sometimes going through the motions with my prayer time with God. We can become stale. We can get too comfortable. We need to come before God in all parts of our lives with expectation of joy, healing and meeting with the one true God, creator of the world, a God who loves us and wants a relationship with us. When we come like the wise men, that's true worship. Let's have a time of reflection as we listen to our song, Here I Am to Worship.